So as we come here on another Easter morning, we have just finished the 40 days of Lent, a time to reflect on our lives and a time to empty ourselves. How many of you gave up something for Lent, right? Did you give up chocolate? Or maybe you gave up meat? All over Louisville we have the fish fries because people are eating fish every Friday. Several years ago, our husband and I embarked on a 40-day journey based on David Nasser's book, A Call to Die, a 40-day journey of fasting from the world and feasting on God. It calls us to give up something in our lives and then replace that time in being in God's Word. Well, my husband and I, being the typical modern couple, just chose to give up television. Now remember, this is the 40 days of Lent through March Madness and the beginning of the NHL season, both of which my husband is very into. It was a very difficult time, but we were emptying ourselves by choice, and we got to make the rules. We got to decide when to start and when to stop. So today, for us, when Easter got here, we got to give it up and start again. But when we are emptied, we're not very comfortable, and so it creates a void or a vacuum, and then everything gets sucked back in, and I think by now we are right back where we were, maybe before that study. So that brings, that many of us, and I would vow to say all of us, have experienced times when we have been emptied, not by choice. Not by choice. That maybe we felt like that fall pumpkin where someone has reached in and grabbed our guts and cleaned it all out. It's not a very comfortable place to be. And I believe that that's where the women in Mark's resurrection story began their mourning. In the beginning, in the first verse of chapter 16 of Mark, we read, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? For the last 36 hours, they had been contemplating the death of Christ on the cross, of which they witnessed, and they were empty of his fulfillment, his joy, and he had been laid in that tomb in such a hurry because the Sabbath was coming. I imagine they were drained of everything emotionally, mentally, even physically after that ordeal, and perhaps they rushed at the end of the Sabbath just to say, we just need to see him one more time. Were they excited or anxious about returning to the tomb? Probably a little of both. But they had a job to do. They brought spices to anoint the body and to go through all the steps that had gotten missed on that Good Friday. And they were focused on that. They were thinking, who's going to roll away the stone? The stone was probably like 6 feet tall and wide and would roll, but very heavy. But that was soon solved for them. For when they looked up, we continue to read, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. And as they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe on the right side, and they were alarmed. Now that word that's translated in the NRSV as alarmed in Greek can mean terrified, or amazed, or astounded. So kind of different meanings. But as we continue to read, we read that the young man speaks to the women and he says, do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, here's the place they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. The young man in the tomb used the same word. Do not be alarmed. Do not be terrified. Do not be amazed and astounded. I don't know. But the women left an empty grave where they had expected to find Jesus' body. And they had a command. I don't know which one of those things was scarier. Go tell a bunch of men that Jesus' body is gone? Or just see the fact that his body is gone? And so we continue and learn that they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Now that is the original ending to Mark's gospel, because some of the most ancient authorities end right there. Can you imagine if there were no resurrection appearances? If all we had was empty? Now the words used in that last verse for terror is that of trembling. Have you ever been so terrified that you trembled? Maybe the storms last week. I know I ran to the basement pretty fast. But the word for amazement is actually the Greek word that we now use as ecstasy. Ecstasy. That is more than joy. That is more than amazement. In fact, it says in one of the outlines of biblical language that this word means a throwing of the mind out of its normal state. And although one is awake, the mind is drawn off from all surrounding objects and wholly fixed on things divine. And one sees nothing but the forms and images lying within, and thinks that they perceive with their bodily eyes and ears realities shown by God. Realities shown by God. Sometimes we've got to be shaken off and get thrown out of our mindset to see God's reality. So the women acted in terror. They said nothing to anyone. I'm wondering, as we once again face and remember the empty grave, will we respond with terror as they did? Will we see the empty and immediately act to fill it up? To seek comfort in this world? To fill the void with thoughts and actions that help us to feel like we're in control, help us to feel secure? Or might we choose to act out of amazement, to allow ourselves to sit in the amazement that Jesus did exactly what he said he would do? To be comfortable with this emptiness, to be okay with being thrown out of our normal state, our fixed mindsets, and to have our minds wholly fixed on the divine. What would that even look like? Can you imagine? What realities might we be shown by God? Even as things have been scooped out of us and we have been made empty, God is there to fill us up but move us forward. Being filled with God is not enough. We must move out of our comfort zone, as the young man told the women, go and tell. I pray that on this resurrection morning, that we will truly believe that the empty grave is all we need. To be amazed and find comfort in the emptiness, and that we ourselves will choose God's grace to fill that emptiness, and we will share the good news of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection to all of God's creation. Amen.